things going forward. But one of the initial recommendations was a brief history and a brief overview and a brief operational discussion that came from Michelle House of Glenview. And we discussed afterwards and thought that would be a good starting point. I asked Ryan Anderson of Lander and Brown if he would not put a presentation together for us. I know many of us have seen bits and pieces of this presentation in the past, but I thought it would be a good starting point for this committee to at least begin the discussion and get some understanding of, if nothing else, I know our commission has been focused for many years on dealing with the issues of fly quiet and nighttime operations. Daytime operations are a completely different animal. Ryan, I just teed you up. If you would go ahead and do the presentation, I think everyone on this committee would appreciate it. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, everyone. So we thought we'd get started with this committee talking about daytime operations at O'Hare and how air traffic handles the high levels of demand during peak hours of the day. Before we do that, though, I do want to go through again a little bit of history and talk about the O'Hare Modernization Program and why it was important to realign the runways at O'Hare to the modern airfield that we have today. So some of this is going to be a bit repetitive to some of you who've seen some of this material in the past, but hopefully things kind of mesh together for you when we're talking about specifically daytime operations at the airport. So first off, and all of you have seen these images before, but I wanted to go back and talk about the airfield prior to OMP. In the early 2000s, the airport, before the airfield construction started and the O'Hare Modernization Program began, the airfield was really out of date. It had a very a configuration that was inefficient. And in 2003, O'Hare experienced more delays than any other airport in the country. And congestion and delay at O'Hare in turn affects the efficiency of the entire air traffic system in the country. And so it's really important for O'Hare to address the delay and congestion problem that was due to its out-of-date airfield. And a big reason for that was that green highlighted knot of runways in the North Airfield was the old Douglas Airport prior to the city of Chicago taking over the airport and turning it into O'Hare. That's where the C-54s were made for World War II. And back then, at that time, aircraft did not have the ability to handle crosswinds that modern aircraft can handle today. And as a result, airports were designed with runways pointing in almost every direction so that aircraft, depending on which way the wind was blowing, could take off directly into the wind. That is no longer the case. Aircraft today, modern aircraft can handle pretty significant crosswinds. So the need to have runways pointing in every direction is outdated. So we needed to deconflict those runways and create a more parallel, efficient runway system, which would not only help deconflict the movements of aircraft on the ground due to that knot on the North Airfield, but as well as handling large volumes of aircraft in poor weather conditions. Once visibility gets reduced, there's a need for air traffic to have separation between aircraft, especially laterally when we're using more than one runway for departures or arrivals. And so kind of deconflicting these runways helps to address the poor weather conditions that we do experience in Chicago as well. So back before OMP, I want to talk about how air traffic used the runways specifically for arrivals. And so originally, if we had a day that the weather was perfect, meaning we didn't have any visibility restrictions or any other weather restrictions, the airfield was able to operate with 3 arrival streams. We had runway 22 right, that crosswind runway that still exists. We had runway 27 right, which is now today renamed to 27 left. And we had 27 left on the south airfield, which has been changed to the current runway 28 right. And so when we had a perfect day, the airfield was able to operate in these arrival streams when we're in west flow. However, if weather conditions were to deteriorate, we would have to lose that 3rd runway and only operate on 2, which greatly reduces the amount of aircraft that the airport can handle. And as the airport, if the weather were to deteriorate further, runway 22 right and 27 left, you can see those 2 red arrows. If you were to extend them, you would see how they would converge in their lines ultimately. And we've talked about this in the past in Flight Quiet Committee and Technical Committee, that converging runway issue. And so in order to deconflict those converging runways, those runways kind of ultimately pointing at each other, we'd have to switch to the parallels, 27 right, old 27 right, current 27 left, and 27 left, current 28 right. And this was ultimately, if weather conditions were poor, this was the best the airport could operate, and it greatly reduced the volume of aircraft the airport can handle. Whereas today on the right side, you'll see we have a much more modern 6 parallel runway system with 2 crosswind runways. As you're aware, we are able to operate 3 independent arrival streams because these are nicely separated and spaced. These 3 arrival runways, 27 right, 27 center, and 28 center, when we're operating in west flow, we are able to operate these 3 runways in pretty much all weather conditions. So visibility, if it starts to get cloudy or rainy, none of these factors are going to take away any of these runways, and the airport is still able to operate in 3 independent arrival streams. Really, the only thing that would shut this down is if we had a significant thunderstorm in the summer or a significant snow event in the winter. But besides that, the airport is able to consistently operate in 3 steady arrival streams, which makes a huge difference for the amount of traffic the airport is able to consistently handle. So as a result, the delays that O'Hare has experienced have been greatly reduced since OMP began. And you can kind of see over the years, as we opened up more and more runways, system impact delays have been reduced by up to 63% when comparing delays prior to OMP. So that deconfliction has really paid off as far as delays at the airport. One of the other things that OMP addressed, and this is something we haven't really talked about in any of the committees, so this is going to be something a little new, but runway incursions have become a significant issue that the FAA is addressing at airports across the country. A runway incursion is, in essence, when an aircraft or other vehicle wanders onto a runway that is being used for arrivals or departures and shouldn't be there. Think of it as like at a traffic stop, a car running a red light. This is an issue that the FAA has started to address. Back in 2015, they started a runway incursion mitigation program looking at airports across the country that have potential areas on the airfield that the geometry of the runways and taxiways may lead to either confusion or an accidental incursion by a vehicle or an aircraft. And so they've labeled these areas hotspots, or areas around the airport that have the potential for one of these incidents to occur. Prior to completion of O&P on the left, you can see there were hotspots all over the airfield that the FAA had identified as potential issue for aircraft or vehicles to find themselves accidentally on an active runway. And so O&P, by realigning the geometry of the runways and the taxiways, making them more efficient, has greatly reduced all of those hotspots around the airport. You'll see on the right, we basically only have 3 right now that the FAA still considers to be a hotspots, but you'll notice they're all at the terminal core where the aircraft are gated. So these are not hotspots that would incur a runway incursion with an arriving or departing aircraft. These are more areas that the FAA is concerned about, fender benders, an aircraft exchanging paint with each other accidentally as they're coming in and out of the gate, or possibly, taking a baggage cart that we've seen recently over the last year. But these are not areas that the FAA is concerned of loss of life, as the hotspots that are on the left were of great concern, with all those areas that could potentially have an aircraft accidentally finding himself on a runway with an aircraft that is also arriving or departing. So a big safety issue that has been addressed at the airport with the realignment of those runways. So now we have a much modern airfield, as we said. You've all seen this slide before. This is the current daytime runway configurations that air traffic has been planning to use of the airfield as especially the North Airfield runways come online with finishing up their navigational aids. But in West Flow, we have 27 right, 27 center, and 28 center as our triple parallel arrival runways. 28 right, 22 left departures, as well as 27 left for departures. And then in East Flow, 9 left, 9 center, 10 center, and 10 right, all available for arrivals. Only 3 at a time that they would use, but depending on demand levels and conditions on the airfield, they would use different groups of 3. And then our main inboard runways, 9 right and 10 left for departures. And again, air traffic, the airfield, all these runways want to be used as best as they can. Air traffic decides how those runways are going to be used for arrivals and departures, and which ones to meet the most, the highest level of efficiency and safety to handle the demand of aircraft at the wanting to take off and land at the airport. So next here, I've got an image of, this is a snapshot of aircraft in the Chicago airspace at one given time. And as you can see, it's a whole mess of aircraft. And what I'd like to do today is talk about how air traffic handles the arrival demands during daytime, and kind of detangle this mess for you and show how there is a lot of coordination and high level of alignment of aircraft going way far outside of Chicago before aircraft even arrive at the airport. So I'm going to go through a couple videos, replays of you of traffic at O'Hare. Let me just pause this for a second. Pull up the video. Okay, hopefully this works. try this. Okay, Maura, can you see this?
Yes.
You can see the video?
Yeah, no, it's working now.
Okay. All right. So thanks for standing by there. So I'm going to show you a replay. This isn't typically we've shown you replays on WebTrack or ANOMS. This is a third party. I'm not going to give them a plug or anything, but you can see their brand label on here. But the reason I'm using this today is it gives me the ability to get a much wider view of the airspace than some of the other tools that we have. And so this does a good job of kind of showing you a big wide scale view of the Chicago air system. And what I want to talk about are the arrival streams that come into O'Hare. And so I'm going to do a replay of peak demand time that was on January 9th of this year at 6 p.m. Where we had a high level of arrival demand. And I just want to talk through how air traffic handles it. And so as I play this, you're going to see kind of quadrants start to flow into the airport. The green line that you'll see that goes around through Michigan, Indiana, down through Illinois, up through Wisconsin, that is the border of the center, the FAA's Air Traffic Control Center that handles, when we've gone through Airport 101, we talk about how air traffic is broken up into various levels of control. This is the center control that feeds in all the incoming flights into the Chicago Center airspace. Those are then passed on to the TRACON, which is feeding then a further level of control down to the airport until we get to the control tower, where the tower then handles the aircraft as it lands and arrives at the airfield. And so when it comes to O'Hare, they refer to the traffic flows coming in through what they call 4 fence posts or fixes in each direction. And so you'll see coming in through Fort Wayne here from the southeast, all of the arrival demand that's coming from our east and southeast markets. You'll see in the northeast some of the other East Coast flows coming in, as well as the northwest and the southwest. And so all of those kind of fence posts, if you will, start to point in to the airport, and air traffic organizes them and funnels them in to the arrival streams. And as you recall, we have those 3 arrival runways, 27 right on the north airfield, 27 center on the north airfield, and then 28 center on the south airfield. And one of the things I really want to emphasize is let me rewind a little bit here on these arrival streams. And those of you that have sat through Airport 101, remember we talk about landing aircraft, or the pattern of traffic when arriving and departing at an airfield. We have what's referred to as the downwind leg. So you can see on the south end of Chicago here, that arrival stream coming in from the southwest, lining up on what's called the downwind leg, which is running parallel to the runways that it plans to land on. And then it turns to, when it makes that first turn to perpendicular to the runway, that's referred to as the base leg. And then it makes a turn to final, and that's that final approach leg into the runway. And so all these flights coming in on the south, those are all getting lined up on 28 center. You can see the arrival stream coming in from the East Coast through that fix on the southeast here. All those aircraft are getting lined up well in advance over the lake here in Lake Michigan with 28 center. And then the aircraft on the north, west, and northeast, you can see those getting lined up and funneling into the runway on 27 right on the north airfield. Now, occasionally you're going to have an aircraft like this large guy here. He probably wants 28 center. As you know, 28 center is one of our two Group 6 runways that handle the largest aircraft. This guy was routed over the top, as they say, got lined up here for the arrival stream on 28 center. But excuse me, some of the things I want to emphasize here is how much coordination there is and how far out aircraft get lined up and queued well advanced, 60 miles or more outside of Chicago before they actually arrive and get on that final approach into O'Hare. And so the next video I'm going to show shows a much closer in view. Pull that one up. Can we see this, Maura?
Yes, yes.
Oh. So this is a zoomed in view of the same time period. And of course, I forgot to mention, in case you didn't realize, these are sped up. These are not actual speeds here. We sped it up to give you a better idea of the movements. So we have our 3 arrival streams, again, coming into our 3 parallel runways. Ignore the they kind of stop, and here that's just a function of the software. But more pay attention how they each get lined up here over the lake, lining up for those 3 arrival streams, 28 center, 27 center, and 27 right. They also, air traffic, you can see this flow of aircraft as they come in and funnel in. Each runway has a specific altitude that the aircraft are brought into, and they're 3 different so as to keep them deconflicted from each other. And so 27 right on the north airfield, those aircraft are brought in down to 4,000 feet by the time they hit the lakeshore. The runway 27 center on the north airfield, those are brought in at 6,000 feet. So those are called the high runway. And so aircraft are able to go underneath that if needed to go to a south airfield runway. And 28 center is at 5,000 feet. And then all those 3, all 3 of those arrival streams, then by the time they hit the lakeshore and the Chicago area, are at about 4,000 feet. And then they continue on that 3-degree glide slope all the way down to the runway. But you can see here in the center, 28 center, that arrival stream that gets lined up well back almost all the way out to Michigan. Those guys are already lined up and in queue and spaced for a long period before they ever reach the airport. And so what I want to emphasize here again is, the real high demand of air traffic that occurs, especially with the arrival streams, and how orchestrated things are well in advance, backed out of the just not the Chicago airspace, but going well outside the Chicago airspace. And if things were to deteriorate at O'Hare, let's say we had a thunderstorm or some other reason that would reduce efficiency, that has a ripple effect through the entire airspace system. And so if we have an aircraft that is supposed to arrive at O'Hare at a certain time and then meet a connection, that's going to cause a ripple effect of delays, not only at O'Hare, but through every other connection that aircraft was supposed to have throughout the day. So it has O'Hare has a significant role in the efficiency of the entire airspace system because of the amount of connectivity O'Hare has and the amount of traffic that come in and out of the airport. And so with that, I do want to talk about that connectivity. And let me pull this up. All right. Sorry. So here is has been one of the best airports for connections historically. And the OAG, which is the official airline guide, it's one of the world's leading provider of flight information and analytics for airports and airlines, has labeled O'Hare still the largest US mega hub. Now, this, of course, was in 2019 before pandemic levels, but they have given it the highest connectivity index score for domestic airport. And so I kind of, this line I grabbed from OAG here, I just want to read it here. On the busiest day in 2019, a total of 83,580 possible connections were possible between domestic scheduled flights within a 3-hour time window at O'Hare. And so just think about that, the amount of connections, possible connections going out of O'Hare. And if O'Hare has a reduction in its ability to handle operations, what effect that has on the entire airline industry as far as connectivity with other airports and flights across the country. And so I just really wanted to emphasize how important O'Hare is to the national airspace system with the amount of traffic demand that it has. And so when it comes to daytime operations, anything that we talk about doing that would reduce the efficiency or safety of the airport is going to be a showstopper for the federal government as far as keeping O'Hare able to handle the demand, and so that it keeps the national airspace system efficient, as well as from the airlines and the traveling public. So as we go through in this committee and talk about the things that we can do during the daytime to help reduce noise, I just want to keep in mind that we are not talking about anything regarding reducing efficiency or demand levels at the airport during the day, because any of that would have significant concerns with the federal government as well as the airline stakeholders. And so, but with that, Mr. Chair, we can go over any questions regarding the information I provided now, and where we can segue into the work plan that this committee brainstormed last time and our approach to covering those topics moving forward.
Thank you, Ryan. That was a tremendous presentation and primer for what I think this committee is charged with doing. I feel it would be important to open up for questions if anyone has any at this time for Ryan on this topic of dealing with the difference between daytime and evening operations, clearly shown by I'll just give it the initials, Ryan, the FR24 graphic that you put up on the screen. Are there any questions from any of the committee members? Maura, I don't see any hands. If you do, no, that's fine. Seeing as there are no questions, Ryan, why don't we go into the next item, and I'll just preface it for you, Ryan. I'll tee you up again. One of the things that Ryan was kind enough to do is he took the bevy of information that came from our first meeting and some others that have come in since, and has put together what we call a work plan for how we think this committee should be, subcommittee, excuse me, should be structured going forward, and some of the things that we may or may not be able to attack. Ryan, you're up.
Yeah, so I think we had a really productive brainstorming session at the first meeting. And so we've organized some of the thoughts here into a work plan for this committee. And we thought it would be beneficial to just go through these topics incrementally. Today we discussed those daytime airport operations, and we've categorized kind of into three major areas. We have the airport operations, aircraft technology, as well as policy. As far as operations, we are happy to go into further detail on daytime operations if this committee wants to explore any areas further in more detail. Wind, how wind plays a role in how the airfield operates and how air traffic handles demand in regards to wind, as far as determining which runway or configurations to use. That should be a topic we discuss, as well as arrival procedures. There's a lot of things out there as far as approaches, the glide slope, that 3-degree glide slope. Is there anything that can be done there, as well as descent profiles? And so then we can talk about aircraft technology, or how engines, airframes, and general technology can be beneficial to reducing aircraft noise profiles. And I know there was interest in talking about the history of aircraft noise profiles, how they've been reduced over time, and maybe what's coming up in the near future, or what can be done in the near future to even further reduce aircraft noise, and what this committee can at least target as far as possible outreach to industry, whether it be airline or aircraft manufacturers or engine manufacturers, to encourage further efficiency and noise reduction in their designs. And then policy. Obviously, the committee wants to have some of the, what can be done during the daytime is limited, but the FAA is a federal agency, and they are governed by Congress, and so any political involvement would be good if there are going to be any changes. One of those things being the noise standards. We've talked about aircraft noise standards, and any policies for encouraging airlines to reduce the use of, or get rid of older aircraft that have higher noise profiles, as well as discuss compatibility planning, not only what airports can do, but what the communities around the airports can do to help reduce noise levels in regards to aircraft on your constituents.
Thank you, Ryan. I think that's a very comprehensive discussion. Like, if we attack just a few of them, I think we'll be a little bit further ahead in trying to help our constituents understand the differences in daytime noise versus nighttime noise. I realize we still give profile to nighttime noise at a 10-factor level compared to the daytime, but given the level of operations during the daytime, committee members, I think it's the reason why Chairman Annunzio wanted this subcommittee seated, to try to get to some of these answers. I'll open it up for questions. I know we took some brainstorm session at the first meeting. We are not limited to these, as I said at the first meeting. We are not limited to these areas. We had some great commentary the first time. I'd open it up for the closing moments of today's meeting to see if anybody has anything further that they've come up with. Brian, I see your hand raised, if I believe. If you have something, please go ahead.
I must have hit it by mistake, but I have to go back to Ryan's first presentation where he was showing the airport operations. In West Flow, there's 3 runways in and 3 runways out. Makes sense. But when you go to East Flow, there's either 3 or 4 in, but only 2 out. Does that affect the operation of the, of the airport as far as how many planes you can get out?
Yeah, that's a good question. And what I would say that as far as departures go, and let me go back to the slide here, I can get to it. Resume share. And so what you're referring to here, Brian, is on West Flow, we potentially could have 27 left, 28 right, and 22 left for departures. In East Flow, 9 right and 10 left for departures. So to answer your question, yes, West Flow, we could handle a bit more departures when we're in West Flow. However, 22 left is really dependent on being on the arrival stream, and you can see the 28 center there arrivals. It's really 28 right and 27 left are the main departure runways, and this one can be used, but has some issues with arrival streams. Whereas on the East Flow side, you don't have that conflict, and we don't really have a third departure runway. We can't use 4 right or 4 left because those would intersect with any of our arrival streams and that kind of converging runway issue. And then on the other side, I will say that, when it comes to West Flow versus East Flow, we do get a bit of a balance throughout the year, but it still does lean more heavily, on the West Flow side. And so the airport does operate in West Flow a bit more consistently than it does in East Flow.
Okay. And one last question, and I don't want to stir up an old story over here, but can you explain, I guess, why the airport got rid of 14 right, 32 left? Why they just couldn't have left it there? I know there's conflicts, but why it couldn't have been left there? Just, a history on it.
So 14 right, 32 left is the one of the original crosswind runways. It was, at one time the longest runway at the airport. And as we talked about, there was a significant conflict with not only intersecting runways, where if we're trying to arrive 27 left or 27 right on the north airfield, those arrival streams, in the event that the aircraft has to do what's termed a go around, if they have to do a missed approach for some reason, will conflict with any departing runways on 32 left. And so that was a significant safety issue in using those runways, being able to use those runways independently. And so decommissioning 32 left allowed the extension of the runway 9 right, 27 left, as well as the new runway 9 center, 27 center. You can see that, if we were to leave those in, that runway would intersect both of those runways, further reducing their ability to be used effectively, as well as all the hotspots we talked about here. Those would be even more hotspots that the FAA would be concerned about, as well as something that is on the near horizon is the terminal area. You can coming up soon. The airport is planning a terminal expansion here to the west, and that runway runs right in the middle of where those terminals would be built. So there are a number of reasons, mostly safety and efficiency, but also to allow room for the expansion of the runways to make the airfield run more efficient and deconflicted, as well as make space for further terminal construction.
But during the design of the airport, was it ever looked at that, you were talking about it was designed to handle the winds, and we really have no runway to the northwest because we do get a lot of wind from the northwest, the west, and the southwest, and I was just wondering if that was looked at in the design and eliminated because of safety reasons and everything.
Yes, it was looked at. It was, and that's something we can talk further when we get into wind, when the wind discussion. But as I had mentioned, aircraft today can handle significant crosswinds. the part of the study as far as O&P and deciding how the runway should be aligned in regards to wind, took into consideration the most typical wind conditions at the airport, and leaving the crosswinds to the southeast and northeast, provided for those a couple of days when we have wind conditions that either directly out of the south or the north. But there was determined that the opposite crosswinds, 14 right and 32 left, wouldn't really, leaving those in would not provide a significant reason for accommodating a wind condition that would rarely occur. And so
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Great questions. Any other questions that any committee members might have at this point, given the presentations of the day? And again, I'd encourage committee members who aren't going to speak to please mute your microphones. Please mute.
I have a question.
Mayor Police, please go ahead.
Yeah, Ryan, so with the terminal expansion and improvements, is that going to get rid of those 3 hotspots or incursion spots that you had on the map?
Well, that is something, the city, the airlines, and the FAA are all looking at. I'm not sure if hopefully they will be addressed, but it's something I don't know at this time. And again, those hotspots are really, I don't want to minimize them, but they're not areas that, again, the FAA is concerned about. People getting hurt. It's more, areas that may cause a small accident that could disrupt operations at the airport. Ideally, there would be no hotspots on the airport. So the city and the FAA continue to try to create an environment that is free from areas that could lead to potential accidents.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Great question. And I would go along with Ryan. I know for a fact that one of the growing concerns, and has been for some time for the FAA, is runway incursions. For as much as we do all kinds of training to tell pilots and in the safety of the operation of the airport, it's actually been a problem. If I'm correct, Ryan, from the statistics I've seen, it's been a problem that's actually been increasing rather than decreasing for the last several years, which is why I believe that 2015 committee/commission, whatever you want to call it, was put in place. I see Peter with a question. Go ahead, please.
The first part of the potential plans here is airport operations. I'd like to see how much of a disruption it would be to switch from east flow to west flow during the day. Is that, if you look at some of the presentation you did, Ryan, where you saw like the planes coming in, and is it possible to show us a day where we did have a switch during the day from east flow to west flow? I'd like to see, is that a huge thing? Does it cause, hours of delays or minutes of delays, that kind of thing? And secondly, how sacrosanct is the 3-degree guide slope? Has there been any more discussion recently about potentially, due to noise, increasing that to maybe 3.5 degrees? I know other airports, for various reasons, have a steeper approaches that way. Is that something that we could talk about a little bit too, that potential?
Yes. So both great topics and questions. As far as the east flow, west flow, I think next when we get into wind, that's something we can show and describe how the airfield switches from east flow to west flow or vice versa. And how maybe it's not exactly a flip of a switch, but you will be able to show how it is a kind of a planned event. And then to your question about the 3-degree glide slope, we can talk more about that. Why what the reasons for the 3-degree glide slope and whether or not there have been any considerations on changing that. And so I think we can cover that in the arrival procedures portion. And if I didn't state it before, that work plan, Chairman and I thought it would be good to, kind of have a theme for each of these meetings. And so possibly the next meeting, we would focus on wind and then move forward incrementally throughout those items on the work plan, each of them kind of having a theme that we can really focus on these topics.
Peter, those are both great questions. And Ryan, I think the interesting thing is on any given day, how many times do we swap the airport around? I noticed when I got up this morning, we were in East Flow. I think probably now we're in West Flow, just based on where I am and not hearing departures now and seeing arrivals. So, and I know even when we took an airfield tour, for those of you that have done it, there was one day we were out on the airfield and we were just getting ready to get on what was then the far end of the runway. And it turned out that we had just swapped the airport around and we were going to be sitting there right on the threshold of the approach. So it happens multiple times during the day. And I'm sure it happens more times than we actually care to talk about. But so I appreciate it. In the closing moments, I want to tie this up into one thing. We've talked a lot here today about operation, how the airport operates and how it operates specifically during the daytime, and just the sheer amount of traffic, as you saw on Ryan's presentation. I mean, that the sector he was showing you is what's known as the Chicago sector. We don't see that level of traffic, obviously, at nighttime. We hear it more, which is why we factor it 10 times when we start doing our ANMS reports and start dealing with the 65 DNL. But the operation of how this works affects all of our constituents in every quadrant and every one of your communities when we turn the airport around. I'll just go to something, and Brian was part of this yesterday, and Mayor Police, I hope you'll appreciate this. Your representative came in and made a very good point. What happens when all of a sudden we swap the airport around and we start going into East Flow and they start using the offset approach on 10 right? You say, well, okay, we're just operating the airport a little bit differently. Well, all of a sudden those people in that quadrant start to hear aircraft noise. When we turn the airport back around, then they don't hear it as much, right? And so the operation of the airport, and I used this term one time in a general meeting, I believe, which is if you can operate the airport more efficiently, and I hope you'll back me up on this, Ryan, if you operate the airport more efficiently, it has an impact on the noise that the communities are going to hear, right? And so the reason why we wanted to start at this level is the operation of the airport directly reflects what the communities hear. And so I'll finish up the meeting today if anybody would have any commentary on that or any thoughts in that area. Hearing none, and I appreciate that. I'd like to close. If anybody has any closing comments, let's go ahead and entertain them now. Ryan, I would like to thank you for your time today. And as always, your input is critical to all of these processes that I know that this subcommittee is going to go through, as well as all the other committees and the General Commission. So I thank you for your time today. And committee members, I thank you for being able to attend today. If we have no other further questions, and I don't see any on the board here, we'll wrap up for today. I promised you when we started this a month ago that my goal in life is to keep these meetings at 50 minutes to an hour. As many of you found, I think, last Friday in the general meeting, when we got through the FAA's presentation, I think most of our eyes were a little bit glazed over when we got toward the tail end of it, just because of the complexity of this whole operation, which is obviously one of the challenges that we have. Seeing nothing else for today, we'll go ahead and wrap up. The next meeting, I'm thankful to say, is going to be in person unless we get Delta Omicron 2.0, which I know all of us hopes to God doesn't happen. And if it doesn't, we will be meeting at the Park Ridge City Hall. My thanks to my community. Park Ridge has been gracious enough to open up City Council chambers for us at 9 o'clock That meeting is going to be April 14th, 2022. These materials that you saw today will obviously be available to you, and we'll get them out to you. That meeting will be held at 9 o'clock. And again, it'll be in person at Park Ridge City Hall. We'll close out today by any comments from any ONCC members. I don't believe there are any others other than the committee members on today, but we will open it up for a moment. And I see no hands for that. So we will go to the final, as we do at all ONCC events. We'll open up for comments from the audience, if any audience members have any comments today. And hearing none there, we will entertain a motion and a second for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Nunzio.
Motion, I believe from, I believe motion from Glenview and second from Wooddale. Maura, if you would please call the roll.
Ernie Krausauer,
Yes.
Michelle House,
Yes.
Brian Gazer,
Yes.
Peter Bilek,
Yes.
Mayor Police,
Yes.
motion carries.
And we are adjourned. Thank you all for your time. Look forward to seeing you next month at the other ONCC events. Have a great weekend.
You too, Ernie. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Ernie.
Thanks, Ryan.
Bye-bye. Bye.